Welcome to this session, where I'll talk about my career path to becoming a developer advocate at MongoDB. To kick things off, let me briefly discuss what the definition of a career looked like for me growing up. My dad taught chemistry at the college in the city where I lived. He would go to work each day to teach and do research. He did that for close to 40 years. He actually was in the same physical office for 36 years. For the most part of those 36 years, not much changed in that office. The pictures were the same, many of the books were the same, the chemical models were the same. It was very stable, and he made a very good living. So stable, in fact, that the house I lived in when I graduated from high school was the same house they bought when I was under a year old. Not much changed in terms of employer or location. This is what many people in my father's and previous generations were taught. I'm sure you've heard something similar to, you go to school, get a degree, get a job using that degree, work in that job, buy a house, raise a family, all with the same employer. Then one day, down the road, you'd retire from that job. This is the path that many folks were taught, and to a certain extent is still taught in American schools. Stay in the same career with the same company for a long enough period of time, and you'll move on up the corporate structure. You'll get raises, improvements to title, more responsibility, and so on. That's the career roadmap we're sold. This actually works very well for academia, which is probably why they still teach it that way. However, that isn't always the case in today's economy. Who here is doing the same job for which they went to school? Who's working for the same company they started their career with? This is perhaps much more indicative of the roadmap many of us face today. We often start in a direction, and there are turns and sometimes setbacks to getting to our goal. Or our career goals change. Or maybe this is more accurate. We start down our career path without knowing exactly where we'll end up. We just hope the path leads to somewhere successful. For many folks in today's world, this seems to be a fairly common career roadmap as well. We do a bit of job or even career hopping. Again, hoping to land in a situation that suits us, allows us to be happy, and provides some semblance of success. That certainly has happened for me. As the opening slide said, my name is Ken Alger, and I'm a lead developer advocate here at MongoDB. My path here has been very interesting, and, I've been told, rather different than most. I thought I'd spend our time together today to let you know a little bit about developer relations in general and how I wound up here. If developer relations is something you've thought is interesting, but that you don't have the right background, I'm here to tell you, you very well might. Now, several of the talks you'll watch here at mongodb.live have a safe harbor statement included that our legal team likes us to include, which basically says, I'm going to talk about a product or feature that may or may not actually be included in a final release, so don't hold me to anything. In a similar vein, here's my talk's disclaimer. Lauren Lee is a developer educator for Nexmo. And this is exactly right. Therefore, as I go through things today, remember that this was my journey. I'm going to point out some things that should be helpful along the way that you can pull from your journey. But please don't think, oh, I didn't do that role, so I'll never be able to work in developer relations. This is a question you'll get asked a lot when you transition into a developer relations or developer advocacy role, or at least I have. In a nutshell, developer relations is responsible for representing the company to the developer community and representing the developer community to the company. What that looks like can be a bit different for each company. Sometimes developer relations falls under the marketing umbrella, sometimes under engineering, and sometimes, and I'll continue to disagree with this positioning, it falls under sales. Here at MongoDB, we happily fall under engineering. Personally, this makes the most sense. As I mentioned, we represent the company to the community and the community to the company. By being under engineering, we have better insights into upcoming products and features, and then a better feedback loop to the engineers that are building those products. Further, we break developer relations into a few different subcategories, if you will. We have teams that are laser focused on building community programs, such as our community forum. We have teams that focus on emerging developers in schools. Others focus on what is called, and you may have heard this term, developer advocacy. As I mentioned earlier, that's my current role. From a practical standpoint, what does someone working as a developer advocate at MongoDB do? What does representing the company to the community look like? We achieve this through content creation, such as blog posts, Twitch streams, sample applications, YouTube videos, webinars, podcasts, and more. We also do conference talks, such as this. When we get feedback from developers from this content, we cycle it back to the engineers for the specific product. What skills, then, are needed to succeed as a developer advocate in developer relations? Well, it's kind of an interesting mix of skills. We certainly need technical skills. We need to know how developers interact with our products to be able to demonstrate how those products make their lives easier. For example, we believe that the document data model provides developers with the best way to work with data. Being able to show how that works in a variety of languages and frameworks is important. The ability to write clearly and concisely is important to take those technical skills and translate them into actionable content for developers. Being able to write for different experience levels is important and can be a challenge at times. Glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, consistently ranks as one of people's top fears. Jerry Seinfeld has this to say about public speaking. According to most studies, people's number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. Death is number two? Does that seem right? That means to the average person, if you have to go to a funeral, you're better off in the casket than doing the eulogy. Mr. Seinfeld is a comedian, so I take this with a grain of salt. However, he does have a point. As a developer advocate, you are often tasked with speaking at conferences, meetups, webinars, podcasts, live streams, etc. For many people, this can be a deal breaker. But with practice, it does get easier, trust me. Speaking coaches, peer input and feedback, and starting at small events make public speaking easier with time. Being able to translate customer issues into actionable feedback for the engineering team is important. This communication can go beyond just the engineering teams as well. Taking community feedback about events, marketing strategy, etc., back to the appropriate department is all part of the job. This is actually pretty nice from an internal standpoint because it allows you to know people all across your organization. Some folks might call this being self-motivated and independent, which can certainly play a part of the time management category as well. At the end of the day, you have to be able to manage your time appropriately with a lot of different tasks and asks. One day you might be writing a blog post, the next working on a slide deck, the next a sample application for a keynote presentation at a conference. Being able to manage your time is important with competing tasks and priorities. Fortunately, this particular skill is common across most jobs and industries. As you can see, there's a lot of different skills beyond just technical skills needed for a role in developer relations. Here's how I managed to put all these pieces together. Like many folks, I started playing around with computers as a kid. I worked with punch cards on the university mainframe to get started, before I moved onto much more advanced systems like Commodore PET, Commodore 64, the TRS-80, and IBM PCs, and IBM PC compatible machines, such as the leading edge computer I had as a kid, with dual 5¼ inch floppy drives, an 8088 processor, and a whopping 256 kilobytes, yes, kilobytes of RAM. After spending my middle school and high school years programming, I started to make different friends who thought that computers were just a fad and would never amount to much. That caused me to make a bit of a turn in my technical journey as I found a new interest area. I ventured into the world of politics, local, state, and federal. I worked for elected officials in their capital and district offices, and I worked on several campaigns across different levels of government. It was a lot of fun to be a young person from a relatively small town, getting to hang out and interact with people that I saw on the national news channels. For example, at one point, I was driving my car down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., in front of the White House, back when you could still do that. And all of a sudden, many heavily armed people appeared on the street and were directing people to get out of the area. When I looked at my rearview mirror, the motorcade for Mikhail Gorbachev, the then chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union, was about a block behind me, headed to the White House. That wasn't something I was used to, being from a small town in Northern California. I wound up meeting many amazing people during my time working in politics and picked up some great skills. The first thing that I was really asked to do was public speaking, from small groups to large gatherings. This was a requirement. While I don't think I was ever particularly amazing at it, it did teach me the importance of developing this skill. Some of the other skills I learned here wound up being some of the foundational skills I would use for many years to come. I was also the office IT person pretty frequently, which kept my foot in the technology knowledge pool. One of the things that I discovered in the political world, especially when working on the campaign side of things, is that while you may choose to work for a particular candidate, you're very closely tied to their career path. If they lose the election or decide to retire from politics, you need to pivot and react quickly to those changes. After several years of seeing behind the curtain in the local, state, and federal government arenas, I decided it was time to take a different path. After deciding to leave politics, an opportunity opened up for me to attend culinary school. New career paths, different goals, and different skills were needed. However, some skills were able to be reused, and again, I was the technology person. This time, instead of in a marble and oak-lined office, it was in the kitchen. Computers were slowly entering into the kitchen in terms of ordering, recipe management, scheduling, and more. I was often leaned on to help out. I was still a bit in the mindset of an A to Z career path, meaning if you do A, B, and C, you'll eventually get to your goal down the road at Z. However, this was my first major jump, where I thought I was going in my career in politics changed to new goals in the culinary world. Skills such as time management, teamwork, and being mentally prepared all were important in the kitchen, and are good skills to have in other roles as well. After working my way up to being an executive chef, I discovered a few things that, although you may hear them, they don't resonate until you actually experience them firsthand. Things like the hours and work conditions aren't great or family friendly, but fortunately, they're offset by really lousy pay. All kidding aside there, it isn't a career that generally works well with starting a family. While I really enjoyed many aspects of the culinary industry, I discovered that my financial needs weren't in good alignment with the industry. Through cooking in restaurants and doing catering events, I was able to meet a lot of people, however. This turned out to be a very important aspect to my career, people networking. Another jump. This time, getting closer to what I discovered I really enjoy doing, working in the technology sector. I managed to get in with a local company that was, and still is, owned by a catering customer. Job and people networking proved very important and useful here. I worked for a company that sold copy machines at a time when the copy machines were just starting to be able to be connected to computer networks and used as high-speed printers. It was great to use my computer skills to make an income. The role was attached to the sales team, and we were leveraged to close deals using more or less by any means necessary. By and large, this worked okay, but sometimes the sales folks would overpromise on compatibility, and then my team was left looking bad. There was more than one occasion when the sales staff would promise that every computer in an office could print to the copy machine, and they never discovered that the network wasn't in existence in the office. Or that the computers were Apple products and the copy machine didn't support Apple. Overall, it really improved a couple skills that I continue to use. The big two were technical and people skills. Learning about a broad range of hardware and software technologies was important. Very similar to being a developer advocate, in that you have to be able to pick up on things quickly across a broad spectrum. People skills were also important in this role, and knowing how to interact with a wide range of individuals, from the so-called frontline users to the economic buyers. This was a good role, and everything was progressing well. I was building my technical skills, being sent to corporate training classes, and doing pretty well with what seemed like a decent career advancement opportunities. And then something happened that few, if any, people anticipated, which caused me to have to react a bit because it suddenly changed the entire economy and world. Sometimes there are things well outside our control. We need to expect the unexpected and try to prepare for it. Sadly, I didn't prepare too much for the events of 9/11, and it ultimately cost me being stuck in the wilderness for a while. Let me start by saying I hope you never have to spend too long on this stage in the wilderness. It allowed me to spend some time picking up lots of different skills, though, as the tech sector tightened up a bit after the events of 9/11. I picked up skills like growing roses and playing video games, but also things like website building and some graphic design skills. Based on gaining some technical skills during my time in the wilderness, and starting to get particularly desperate, I had to again turn and pivot into a new role. I had a friend who was looking for some assistance with his company, and my skills seemed to be a good match. Job networking once again proved useful in landing a role. However, I was hoping from day one that this wasn't going to be the new A to Z career roadmap. But it wound up lasting for a while, and it did help me get through some of the economic recovery periods caused by the after effects of 9/11. I was in a production management role producing decorated garments, like t-shirts with screen printing, hats, jackets, and bags with embroidery, and we also manufactured high school letterman jackets. I was doing some technical and management things here, but was discovering that the owner really didn't have a good roadmap for his business. He called me into his office on a Monday and told me that he had laid off a third of the staff the previous Friday and needed me to take up most of that slack. Additionally, he needed to cut my pay by a third. To paraphrase a line from the Godfather movie, he made me an offer I could refuse. Yet another react fast turn in my career. I had a family to feed and bills to pay. I thought, I can swing a hammer and sling paint for a few months while I look for a technical job. What I thought was going to be a few short months of swinging a hammer turned into roughly 10 years. Then, with many of my construction customers aging and moving into different living situations, it became apparent that I needed to find something else. Another turn in direction. Another turn, but I had a pretty good idea that I wanted to use the technical skills that I'd been accumulating over my career. Based on some relationships that I'd built with an online learning company, I landed a role there. I was hired to manage one of their certification programs, and that eventually led to me teaching courses on Python, Android, and data analytics and visualization. I was able to put together a lot of the skills I had learned along the way. Further, it was, finally, in an industry that I wanted to be involved with. I really liked this role. I was able to use some writing skills, but also several other skills, such as public speaking and, of course, technical skills, since I was teaching technology. My daily role here was to write scripted course content, then record it in a studio, and work with internal teams to see these concepts come to life. Since many of the courses I taught were assigned and I had other areas of technology I was also interested in, I did extra work as well. I was blogging a lot outside of my official work, frequently about MongoDB, and I was creating developer-focused content. That got me on the radar of the folks here at MongoDB. I'll tell more about that story here shortly. My other roles had primarily been obtained by who I knew. With the skills I developed over the course of my career, it was now about what I had done and shown that I could be doing, along with knowing the right people at the right time. Going back to the career path roadmap, I've definitely jumped around a bit, taken some roads less traveled, but I finally found a great position, industry, and company for which to work here at MongoDB. But how do all of the skills I picked up along the way fit into developer relations? Going back to the beginning, and what's some of the main skills that are needed for developer relations? Technical, writing, public speaking, feedback, and time management. I somewhat unknowingly picked up these skills along the way. While I was at the online learning job, as I mentioned, I was writing a lot of blogs about MongoDB and got noticed by them. Well, I guess us now that I'm here. I'm really pleased to be working here at MongoDB in developer relations and have found what I have been looking for a long time career-wise. It just took me a while to get here. The world of developer relations, at least here at MongoDB, is split into different areas of concentration. We're very fortunate to have the support of the C-suite and board of directors for developer relations here. The result of that support is that, as individuals, we don't have to handle all of the tasks that fall to developer relations. If one thinks of the skills that I've mentioned, writing, public speaking, technical, time management, and feedback, that can be a lot for a single individual or even team of individuals to do if they're trying to cover all of those things. Here at MongoDB, we've separated them out into 5 different pillars. The folks on the developer advocacy team tend to be the ones that are speaking at conferences. The content team creates content like blog posts, Twitch streams, YouTube videos, podcasts, etc. We have a team that is dedicated to engaging with the incredible MongoDB community through forums and training of community members on how to become good stewards of the MongoDB community. To better serve the beginning developers out there, we have an emerging developers team that focuses on academia and startups. Finally, we have a team that works on building platforms for developers to connect with and learn from MongoDB. Things like our community forums and developer hub. Now, while these are all different focus areas, there is some overlap as well. So what can you do to move into developer relations? Now, these may seem obvious, but I'll point them out anyway. We all need to determine what's important to us and where our boundaries are, both good and bad. We all have some form of financial needs. Well, at least I know what I do. If I don't make X amount of money, things become problematic. This was one of the reasons I left the culinary industry. What does work-life balance look like for you? Some of us are destined to be workaholics and have the support of our family if we put in 16, 18-hour workdays. For others of us, a work-life balance that is tipped more towards life than work is important. Figure out what your balance is and find a position and company that will support that. What are your interests? I've done a lot of different jobs, and some of them were primarily used to put food on the table. I didn't have a particular interest in the job or industry, but it paid the bills. This typically doesn't lead to long-term career happiness. I put in moral limits here based on my time in politics, but I think it holds true for many industries. There are certain sectors of the economy that I don't want to work for based on my own personal beliefs. One of the reasons I got out of politics was that I saw firsthand how many times people had to bend their beliefs in order to be successful. That just wasn't for me. What I have discovered is that a job and career needs to have a good balance of all of these. Something that meets all of these aspects. This is my target, at least. With the knowledge of what's important to you defined, how do you piece it all together and land a dream job in developer relations? How do you hit your target? As I think back in my career, I can't think of a single instance where my resume was the transformative reason I got a job. Sure, my skills were important, but my physical resume, the thing that we used to print on fancy paper and mail to employers, I can't recall that being the reason I got a job. For me, it's all been about networking and knowing people. And by knowing people, I don't mean that I was necessarily best friends with folks, but I seemed to be in the right place at the right time for the jobs for which I was hired. Don't get me wrong, having a good resume and skill set is vital as well. And you definitely want to keep current on skills. Technical skills, soft skills, and picking up skills that you don't think are directly related to software development can be helpful as well. Knowing how to edit videos or use graphic software, like Photoshop or Illustrator, for example, are all part of the developer relations toolkit. Do things you haven't tried before. Write a blog, make a YouTube video, do a Twitch stream, tackle a different framework or programming language. Part of being in developer relations is being able to quickly learn a new technology and then explain it to other people. If you're a JavaScript developer during the day, dive into a Python Flask tutorial and then write a blog series about the journey. Trust me, there are others that will be interested in your take on it. This brings me to my final point. To illustrate this, I'll go back to my story of coming on board at MongoDB in developer relations. I had recommended someone else for this team, and the director of Dev Rel here at the time told me they were looking for someone with different qualifications than the person I had submitted. I told him, okay, that's great. Then I asked him, out of curiosity, what are you looking for? He said, to be honest, someone like you. While I was happy with my position at the time at the online education company, I'm ecstatic about being here at MongoDB in developer relations. By asking that question and having prepared my skill set with the strange intersection of skills needed, I have found what I should be doing in my career and where I should be doing it. I hope that by putting these ideas into action, you can hit a bullseye in your career path. To wrap things up here, MongoDB is hiring. If you'd like to chat about careers here at MongoDB, feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Ken W. Alger on Twitter, and you can send me a DM. If you prefer email, feel free to send it to me at ken.alger@mongodb.com. Finally, if you're a MongoDB Atlas customer and would like $200 worth of Atlas credits, use the code ALGER200, and that can be added to your account. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and enjoy the rest of MongoDB Live.